Boss Brief, a strategic guide on how not to be an asshole at work. You'll learn about bad bosses, how they can be detected and handled, as well as how to tell if you happen to be one. Join an executive and an executive coach, both artists working in marketing and advertising from over 2 decades, who are here to offer you the ultimate guide on how to navigate any employment landscape. Here are your hosts, Eugene S. Robinson and Stephanie Peirolo.
Welcome to the Bad Boss Brief. I'm Stephanie Peirolo.
I'm Eugene S. Robinson.
And today we are on episode 21, and this is the gossip show. Only,
yeah. You know, I heard from this guy.
No, not
really
that kind of
show.
gossip.
Okay. All right.
We are not going to gossip about others. At least that wasn't on the agenda. You never know what's going to happen. We're going to talk about gossip at the workplace. We're going to talk about gossiping bosses, gossipy workplace cultures, and the difference between gossip and management. So that's on our topic today. Do you have any gossip experiences that leap to mind?
Yeah. Well, I mentioned to him before, the guy who ostensibly took out a contract on his wife, that it didn't work. So he was not in jail and she was still alive. But this was a pretty active rumor. He was an executive. So it single-handedly guaranteed that pretty much everybody who worked under him was nice to him. Because you never know when that moment was going to come where he might decide to try it again. So, but I've never had, to me, that's life-saving gossip. But, yeah, you've heard, there've been whisper campaigns, and I'm usually the last person to know, like all of the office affairs, which is usually what gossip, it tends to trend toward. I've been completely blinded at it. It never dawned on me that you would actually have an affair with somebody you worked with. Why would you do that? You're stuck there anyway, right?
Yeah. So I guess what I think is interesting when it comes to gossip is to first look at why do we gossip, right? And I think that there are some reasons that we have to pay attention to. We can't just say there's no gossip without recognizing what is it that gossip serves, right? I always say this to clients and to friends. People generally do things that serve them.
Right.
So if people are gossiping, what is it that it's serving? So the things that I came up with was, first of all, information is power. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, especially at companies that aren't really transparent about what's happening, there'll be this information vacuum, and gossip will jump in there. Right? Another reason is it really.
Well, hold on. Okay, maybe you could help me figure out the difference between information and gossip. Like, what qualifies gossip in your mind?
I think that gossip is. It's not. This is. The difference between gossip and management, I think, applies here. Gossip is factual, and it is moving towards some sort of positive action.
I got you.
So I think that gossip is usually going to be, in my mind, something about personalities. Mm-hmm. Like you said, who's having an affair with who has, a drug problem, some of those things. But those can leach into actual business problems, right? So one of the big vacuums that I see, having spent so many times in advertising agencies, is that, a lot of agencies, unfortunately, will have 1 or 2 really big cornerstone clients, which means that the financial health of that agency rests on the relationship between the client and the agency. And if there are problems, right, like a new CMO comes in, everybody knows in advertising that that's a really touchy time for the existing agencies, because a lot of CMOs will come in and throw the account to review. People will get nervous, and then they start making up stories. And the stories usually are personality based. So, for example, I'm making this up, right? Totally making it up, not referring to anybody. Joe, who's the account lead on that big account, has been out of the office a lot. I think he's looking for another job. That must mean that the account is going to go and review, right? It's those kinds of things where people get afraid, they don't know what's happening. And in those circumstances, information would be if the senior account person came out and said, hey, I know that there's a new CMO at this account. I recognize how, dependent we are on that for our financial stability. What we're doing is we're going to put together a reel of the past work and a proactive look forward for their new launch effort, whatever, right? So it's taking that information. There is a new CMO, acknowledging that everybody at the agency knows what that means and getting ahead of it, right? And I think that's the difference between knowledge or information and gossip, and where there isn't information, where there is a culture that the leaders don't talk about what's actually happening. That's where I think that you get that disconnect.
Right. In other words, rampant gossip.
Exactly.
Right. And people rush to fill that void.
Right. And what I've seen that's been challenging is that I've been involved with a couple of cultures where obviously there are things that management can't tell the rank and file, right? You can't say that Joe is gone for 30 days because he's in treatment for a significant, cocaine addiction. You can't say those things, right? But I think that there are some cultures where everybody keeps everything so close to the vest that people know that they're not being told the truth, right? I think there's a kind of healthy transparency, and that a lot of and agencies or companies that don't do that really kind of they set the stage for a lot of gossip. But I think one of the things about gossip too is, it's always usually spoken of pejoratively or diminished as, it's telling tales. But sometimes gossip is a way that people in community express their sense of community, right? Because for a lot of people, community is their workplace, right? A lot of people stay at bad workplaces because that's their neighborhood, right? Like it or not, they feel connected to the people, whether they're working remotely or working at home. So sometimes that gossip is a concern, right? Like, hey, how's he doing? I haven't heard much from him. Is he okay? Or whatever, last time I heard, Lily's grandmother was really sick and I know that she raised her and they're really close. How has she been? So I think that there is an aspect where we talk about one another, but it's clearly coming from a place of genuine concern. And there clearly is an acknowledgement that we are a community. However, ruled by capitalism we're still a group of people that stay in the same place and do things together.
Have you ever had the occasion to have uncovered gossip about yourself?
Yes and no. I mean, generally, I have been in positions in the work world where I'm not liked because of the virtue of the job that I do. Right. So I did new business, and new business at agencies, for those of you that don't know, requires going to the existing staff of creative and strategists and account people and saying, I know that you have a full-time job where you're working 50 hours a week. I need you to now come in on the evenings and the weekends to work more. Right. And that pitch is going to be run like a Broadway show. And I am going to be the producer and director. And that just sets you up for, and I would say that to people. I would say that to teams. I'd be like, by the end of this pitch, you're going to hate me. And that's okay. That's all right. I'm okay with that. So part of it was me acknowledging that out of the gate. And I know people talked about me, but it has never really bothered me. I mean, that thing when you walk into a room and everybody stops talking?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That has happened to me many times in my
experience. Yeah, I like that. There was a great line from that Nicki Minaj song, Sorry to Go Pop on You. She goes, when I walk in the room, I want you to sit up straight. And I don't care if I was late. It's like, stop talking. I'm here. I don't care what you were talking about, but yeah.
Well, and I think especially early in my career, what I was doing and how I was doing it was transgressive because I was a woman. I was a woman in tech. I was the only woman on the sales team. People talk trash about me. And and there's always been, like, particularly when I was younger, there was always an ongoing conversation about who I slept with.
Yes.
Because I was single. I was a single mom.
Yeah.
That went on. And, I wasn't going to agree, disagree. I wasn't doing anything in the workplace, but I don't know, you just kind of get used to it. What about you? Have you found out people gossiping about you?
Yes. They were accusing me of sleeping with the CEO, which I wasn't, but that gave me ideas, which I hadn't had before. I was like, oh, maybe I missed something. But, they were malcontents and I was running circles around them. So it was convenient to understand that I was being given carte blanche, not because I was winning awards, but because the CEO had decided to sleep with me. So
well, and I think
I wasn't particularly bothered by it because I was going to keep still trying to win awards. So
well, and it's a way to take someone down a peg. Right? Like if I'm coming into the workplace and I'm doing something new or interesting or I'm being particularly successful,
right.
What's the best way to undercut that is to be curious about like who I have sex with.
Right. And it's also like, he didn't do this by dint of skill or talent. Well, not editorial skill or talent, but some other talent. So maybe that's why he's getting away with it, which was, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, that's not, but it is. And I think one of the things too that I will say sometimes, especially to younger people, is beware of the gossipy people because they're going to do whatever they're saying. If they're talking trash about Liz to your face, when you leave, they're going to start talking trash about you to Liz.
I've also found, and you could let me know if this, in your experience, compares out, that the first person to try to cozy up to me on any job is the person that I should least trust because they burn their bridges with everybody else. And they're trying to get the new guy in under the cloak of ignorance on their side. So it's never, when I was at Apple, same thing, this guy named Jim, the very first person to come up, hey, we should go do, has always been, I'm talking about 20 years of corporate research, has always been the last person I should really be, affianced to, or with.
Dude, I guess what I found is I remember the childhood dynamics. Like we moved every couple of years, so I changed schools every 2 years. So I got really good at kind of sizing up the playground dynamics. And I think that still plays into how I work now. But the first kids that would try and be my friends were the unpopular ones.
Right.
So, but I think that the idea is the first people that want to be friends with you might be the lonely ones. They might be the discounted ones. They might be the marginalized ones. And those can often be really valuable friendships.
Yeah, right.
Right? Those can be valuable people, especially because they're usually in the boring jobs like tech.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, the one I'm thinking about that I mentioned in my memoir was the one whose father was a head of the local version of the KKK. So, so he had no friends, and he chose me early, and he seemed like a nice enough guy. But one day I stayed too long in the house, and his dad came home, and he said, "Get out," and I was like, he goes, "Oh, no, it's okay. We got to eat dinner." And I went home and told my father, and he goes, "Well, that's probably because his father's in the KKK." Why don't you? You knew that. Why would you let me? You knew where I was going.
Little heads up. Little heads up. Well,
yeah, exactly.
And one of the things that I think is, and this everybody kind of understands gossip, right? The stuff we're saying isn't groundbreaking in any way. But I think what's important is to recognize the difference between management and gossip. And it is surprising to me how many people don't get this, right? And I think it's important to understand it and to name it, particularly if you're a leader, right? So the difference is if you are gossiping, it's personal, it's subjective, and usually you are making stuff up. If you are managing and talking about a third party who isn't in the room, and what you're saying is factual, it's based on their work, and it is connected to some sort of action to help them improve, then it's management. And a lot of times, because it is of the nature of management that you will have 2, 3, 4 people in a leadership capacity who are talking about someone who isn't present. And unfortunately, a lot of times it just becomes subjective, right? And that's the gossip. So here's the difference, right? If you're factual and moving towards action, you might say something like this. Eli has missed the last 3 deadlines he's been assigned. Who is going to talk to him and find out why this is happening and what sort of support he needs and set boundaries for him to understand the consequences of this happening again?
Right.
Okay. Right. You're acknowledging it's factual. Eli has missed the last 3 deadlines. The action is who's going to talk to him and make sure that nothing is wrong. He doesn't need more support and that he understands that this is not acceptable. Gossip is Eli missed another deadline. He has no respect for authority. He thinks he can do whatever he wants because he's a spoiled trust fund baby. You know what he said to me? That's gossip. It's subjective. It's not based on facts. And it obviously is the person who's speaking has a lot of opinions and energy around Eli. And there's no question of like, what is the action we are taking?
Wow. Yep. I like that.
And I think it is important, particularly if you have a culture, and you can recognize it immediately. If you have a culture that's prone to gossip, especially if you're a new leader, it's great to be able to name that, right? So if I heard that second thing about Eli's a spoiled trust fund baby, if I had power and was in leadership, I might say something like, let's try to focus on management as opposed to gossip. Or you could just say, let's try to focus on what are the facts that we know and what are the actions that we are taking. Has this been an ongoing thing with Eli? Do we need to put on a performance plan? Is there something that's happening with him?
I had a lot of heavy lifting to do in that regard with Code magazine. It was started by folks from Condé Nast, and it was a fashion magazine, which aggressively framed how people dealt with each other in meetings. There was a lot of stalking out of the meetings. There was a lot of just massive amounts of backbiting, backstabbing, gossip. And when the people who had started from Condé Nast left and they put me in charge of it, I had a meeting specifically to address this. And I was like, we are, we're stevedores, and the heavy lifting that we're doing is putting out a magazine, and all that other stuff has got to stop. If you stand up from a meeting, snap your fingers and walk out the door, that is the last meeting you'll be going to, right? I want it to stop. I just want it to stop. It doesn't help me get this job done, and it doesn't help put the magazine out. If you've got questions that you'd like to ask, and ask them now. I'm available always in private. You want to come to my office to talk to me about it, but we really got to stop. And everybody heard. I had one dissenter who said, I think Eugene is homophobe. Because I said, the snapping had to stop. And somebody said, I don't think Eugene's a homophobe. And that ended that. And pretty much everybody's boat was going in the same place at that point in time. So it was really nice too, because prior to, I would say that you can never affect change, that people are hardwired into the ways they are. And that's just the way it's going to be. But it actually, shockingly, it surprised me. And I guess maybe it's because I was in an executive position, a position of control, and I had the stick as well as the carrot. But it took that meeting, and then the next meeting was okay, and the meetings after that were pretty uneventful and fruitful. So it took about 2 meetings to really work.
And what you did that was skillful is you were very, very clear about what behavior was and was not acceptable.
Right.
And you were also very clear about what the consequences are going to be. You're going to lose your job.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
no door slamming, none of that shit. I hate it. So please stop.
And you are also not a gossipy person.
No.
And I think part of the challenge is that some leaders really enjoy gossiping.
Yeah.
Right? They like it. Yeah. And they, want the people that work for them to come in and give them, all of the information, whether it's appropriate or not, whether it's personal or not. Yeah. And I think that there are people who get really into that, and having a leader who isn't. I mean, I think it's interesting, like, both you and I, for most of our, we don't really care what other people think about us, which means there's not that sort of hook. Whereas I think a lot of people do really care about what others think about them. And they are really it's almost like they want the work version of likes and retweets.
Yeah, right.
Right? Do people like me?
Right.
Do people want to be, my friend? Do they think I'm doing a good job? And that's where gossip comes in, because they're milking their direct reports for some feedback on whether or not people are liking them.
Yeah, whatever. I know one advice I had from the CEO who everybody thought I was sleeping with. She said, you have to talk to people. I was like, what? I do talk to them. She goes, no, you have to talk to them. Be interested in their lives. And I was like, that. That's a bridge too far. I can't. Sorry. So anyway.
I remember you telling me that early on in your career, saying that, all these people want to come and tell me their feelings. I didn't think management was people coming and telling me their feelings.
I don't care about your feelings. I don't want the magazine to come out, please. Yeah, exactly. So it's caused me problems. I'm quite convinced that she was right. And had I invested more time, then I'd had an easier go, Tell me about what happened when your girlfriend moved out. Sorry.
Well, and I think one other point is, what do you do if you're not boss? Right? Yeah. What do you do if you're in an environment where there's a lot of gossiping? And I think, you can try a couple of different things if you don't have a lot of power. One is just diverting, right? So back to our friend Eli. You could, if somebody's saying, talking trash about Eli, you could say, I wonder if he's okay.
Yeah, right.
I wonder if there's anything that's going on with him
to derail
in his home life, correct. Right? This is a human being that we are speaking of. Can we, reframe that? I one time worked shared an office with a woman who she loved to gossip. It was like her favorite thing. And I tried all sorts of diversion techniques. And finally one spring I said to her very seriously, I can't have that conversation with you because I gave up gossiping for Lent. And she believed me.
That's great.
And she, she was a good person. And she was like, I want to help Stephanie in her spiritual practice by not talking trash about people. Yeah, and it really even, Lent ended, but we didn't go back to that. Right. And I think a useful thing to think about in general is the notion of triangulation. And triangulation is just simply if you and I are talking about a third party who is not in the room, that's triangulation. And I think it's important in work to always be alert when triangulation starts happening.
Hey, and I'll before we move on to the next segment, I'll give you this little thing that I thought was great. I had a boss from the Wall Street Journal, and he said, Eugene, could you come in here for a second? And he's in his office with somebody else from the Wall Street Journal that had come along with him to the job. And he said, hey, Kate was just telling me that you intimidate her. And she's like, I didn't say that. He goes, no, you just did. So this is a type of boss that we've covered before, because this was kind of an asshole-ish thing to do. But at the same time, nobody would ever gossip with this guy again, because he's fundamentally saying, we don't have a gossip policy. If you're talking about somebody, I'm going to share it with them. So it was. And I think... and she was called on at that point with me sitting there to clarify what she meant, which is that, he's been here so long that I'm, giving him feedback. It makes me a little nervous. I guess that's fine. That's okay.
And I think that the only exception to this, which is important to call out, is that if I'm in management and someone comes to me and complains about being harassed or treated in a way that is unsafe or makes them feel unsafe,
yes.
Triangulation is fine in that circumstance, right? Yeah. So right. Those are different circumstances. In that case, triangulate, figure out, that's take it to HR. So yeah, I think that's the main stuff about gossip. Do you have a fire me?
I do. I have a kind of a two-pronged thing. Well, actually, I have a fire me to Sub Rosa. We'll save Sub Rosa for later. Okay. I'm sure many of you do not read my Substack, but I'm going to go geopolitical here for a second, and I am the recent situation in the Middle East. Let's step away from, the rightful emotions surrounding these moments, and look at Bibi Netanyahu as a leader, a boss, as he has been for almost close to 2 decades now, if not more. And I would have to say, Hamas is amorphous. I don't really know who we would count as a leader of that organization. But and I don't think it needs to be said, but I will say it that I think what happened was beyond the pale and horrible. But I believe that Bibi has served his country badly, and I think the techniques of the leadership techniques of bullying, not taking taking surveys of people, temperatures of the room, not being willing to compromise and I'm talking about just in the country, within your own party, within your parliament. I think that this, it always bears this type of fruit. It's not a collective. It becomes the diktat of a singular individual. At this point, somebody who was looking at corruption charges. So I have to say that, as bad bosses go, this will provide him a lot of cover, and a lot of material support, but I don't think there should be any mistake that he I got shit for supporting Zippy Livni, and I got shit from Israelis for supporting Zippy Livni because they felt that she was an empty suit. She was like the Israeli Kamala Harris. But the reality of it is, I think in 2023 that we have to think of different ways to do things, and it starts with getting a leader who crossing swords is not, it's not. I mean, I'm thinking about Yitzhak Rabin, rest in peace. But I think this is bad bosses in action. And all of the bad bosses globally have been excited about this development, whether it's a bad boss in Russia who has been excited about it, bad bosses in Iran who are putting young women in comas on subways because they don't have headgear, bad bosses in Hungary where Orban is, I'd like to see that tide switch. And in this instance, it seems to. Poland just had their elections, and it seems like the bad bosses in charge of the Law and Justice Party, which should tell you everything you need to know, or maybe are on their way out. So maybe we can see, a tide switch. So that is my fire me. Sorry.
No apologies. It's interesting because we had accidentally dueling Substacks, because what I wrote last week was called Quiet, which is it's okay not to weigh in on everything. Right?
Yep.
Especially things where, like me, I don't have a lot of knowledge.
Yep.
And what I was suggesting, because what's been interesting to me, and this is shifting right from what you were saying, is the dialogue around which side are you on, and the very strident demands to pick a side.
Yes.
That were really kind of crested last week. This week, I feel like on the social media sites that I'm watching, there's more of a generally, let's all agree that killing people in these ways is bad, particularly non-combatants, right? There's a little bit more context. But what I thought was interesting was that it seemed as if many people, at least in the kind of work sphere where I'm going to hear about them, right, forgot the mechanics of social media. That the way that our friends Musk and Zuckerberg make their bajillions is by monetizing rancor.
Right.
Which means that every incendiary, way out there, flaming comment is the one that the algorithm is going to push to the top. Because that's the one that people are going to respond to, pro or con. And I really felt like in a lot of the people that I'm following on social media, these are marketing professionals. These are people that know the score. They know as much as, if not more, than I do about how social media algorithms work. And yet they were, wading in. And it was really disappointing to me because it's like, can we just let go of the pretense that we can have a reasoned conversation about anything in the social media? Social media is not a public square, right? Instagram, Facebook, they're not public squares.
How much have you ever solved at a bar, right? Social media is just an electronic bar. We're not solving anything. The Hague is not calling us. We're not being invited to Davos.
Right.
I don't have a call here from the Secretary of Defense. Nobody's asking for my opinion about anything, or yours, or so there are ways to get involved and to have your opinion matter. But otherwise, we're just screaming down a Zuckerberg tube, or Musk tube. It's pointless.
Yeah, but I saw and read and heard multiple times that if you as individuals or corporations or brands do not clearly telegraph who it is that you support, your Palestinian friends will never speak to you again. You're alienating all the Jews you've ever met. I don't believe that. And, I put this in my Substack. It's like, my friends are not going to stop being my friends because I don't spout off on something, because I am quiet about something where I am not educated and I am not informed. But that was really the language. Like, you're going to lose all of your customers if you don't do X, Y, or Z. Right. And I think we should retire the hyperbole, or at least take a little rest from it for a week. Well,
you have better friends. I actually lost a friend this past week. Not over the Middle East, over Ukraine.
And what can you tell a little bit more about that?
He just burst out with, he goes, you've been crapping on my opinion for 2 years. You've been relentless and disrespectful. And I was like, I'm not having this discussion with you. This is just something that doesn't affect us. He goes, yeah, my son is almost draft age, and if he goes to war, there's going to be hell to pay. And your head is, so you're threatening to shoot me? And he goes, well, I'm just saying that. And I was like, then he also somewhere in this discussion admitted that he's bipolar and that his meds might be off. So there could be that. But at this point now, we are no longer friends. So.
Well, and maybe that's not such a bad thing.
Not such a bad thing. I don't feel, anytime anybody leaves, I never feel bad about it. Starting with my father.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's what we've got.
Anyway.
On that note, anyway, we would love to hear from you. Comments, suggestions, ideas for shows. Sub Rosa. You can reach us at WTF@badbossbrief.com. That's WTF@badbossbrief.com. And we'll see you later. Thanks.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Bad Boss Brief podcast with your hosts, Eugene S. Robinson and Stephanie Peirolo. You can check out more of their work by visiting consigliera.substack.com for Stephanie and eugenesrobinson.substack.com for Eugene. You can also find Eugene at Mr. Sleep 3, that's number 3, on Instagram. Reach out with your questions, concerns, work case situations, or suggestions to us at WTF@badbossbrief.com. We personally answer every submission. Be sure to join us at badbossbrief.substack.com every other Wednesday for episodes of Bad Boss Brief and every single week for our Sub Rosa shorts, so you can gain further insights into your workplace environments. Until next time, don't be an asshole at work.